Hello and welcome to Vision Denial. My name is Sam, and if you're new here, I've watched every single playoff of the summer season, yes, all 383 games, and I've been reviewing every day of Worlds so far. And it's day 3 of groups, where a lot of some expectations are met, somewhat others are exceeded. It's been a rather interesting time, and yet the truest thing ever is that every North American team is down every single game you can think of. Will it ever be their year where they're up before they actually have to really pull things off? Who knows? Many of these particular reviews that I'm going to be putting in onto the video, I will also be uploading onto TikTok, so if you want to go and check that there, links are down below. Otherwise, this was an incredibly fun set of games to watch at this point. And so let's just get right to it then. Our first game of the day is GAM Esports, the VCS's first seed, versus Rogue, the LEC's first seed. Now, this is the second time that the early game from GAM was taken advantage of. But instead of it being a full stomp, GAM's mid to late game macro choices really pulled through to take that 4K deficit and make it equal. Rogue, for their part, really play that early game excellently, attacking the win conditions from GAM while elevating their own in a way that made it really hard to contest any points of attack. The fact that they slowed down during the mid game has me slightly worried, but as they kept up solid vision, wave management, and neutral setup, that it didn't feel like a big concern at the time. That is until that first Baron that was stolen by Levy, and at that point it looked like Rogue were just struggling to actually close things out. They still course corrected at this point, and it's still concerns that I have regarding their consistency that usually would be on high alert, but Rogue has usually just completely dissuaded much of that issue. My MVP for this game is Malrong, whose early game pathing and pressure really made the difference in this game. Our second game of the day is 100 Thieves, the second seed of the LCS, versus GEN.G, the first seed of the LCK. The early game from Gen is starting to concern me. Or I expected them to match the energy that 100 Thieves would bring. Instead, we wind up with a team that looked lost and was really struggling to keep up with the solid proactive play out of 100 Thieves. That said, 100 didn't do so much here in terms of ballooning the leads or controlling the tempo, mostly going through the motions at this point. There was a solid angle to push someday ahead, but once they took the tier 1, the focus from them was lost, and Doran ended up having a larger impact in the scale of the match. The lack of focus on the Drakes also hurt 100 Thieves, as the Soul came quickly, and the lack of proper setup meant that GEN.G punished appropriately. Once GEN.G had a significant lead and the control, they started to just play like they did in the LCK, which is not a great look either, that they needed the lead for them to look like they usually do. My MVP goes to Peanut, who managed to create the win conditions necessary for GEN.G to secure that game. Our third game of the day is Edward Gaming, the third seed from the LPL, versus Fnatic, the third seed of the LEC. The invade at level 1 was bad, but what was worse was how Fnatic responded to the play by doubling down, while Edward Gaming had a lot of investment towards the bot side of the map. It was really solid to see the non-stop aggression coming out of Fnatic to create new openings, but Edward Gaming knew exactly how to respond and create openings for themselves just as a response. That said, Edward Gaming were looking to fight in many awkward angles and did not really punish or push the tempo of the game as hard as they could have, given the large lead they had accrued. Regardless, it looked like on a team fight basis, Edward Gaming was playing with stronger margins, while Fnatic played mostly to punish, which is not a great look. This game was a lot closer than the scoreline would indicate, and that mostly had to do with how each team punished the mistakes of the other more than their own proactivity. My MVP goes to Viper, whose positioning this entire game was excellent to maximize damage. Our fourth game of the day is Cloud9, the first seed of the LCS, versus T1, the second seed of the LCK. There was something here that could be analyzed, as a team is both proactive at getting their win conditions ahead and absolutely shut down their opponents before it could even get off the ground. Cloud9 looked so lost and baffled at the situation that the only move they really held was overwhelming one side of the map as the rest of it crumbled beneath them. T1 looked so measured in this game, it was really surprising to see them take this standard and well set up composition, but honestly, it looks really good and some positive things to come for the squad. Cloud9, for their part, have a lot of work to do as their lack of proactivity severely hurt them this game. And when they finally tried any moves, it always looked like it was always on the back of losing neutrals and turrets. They need to have better map answers. My MVP goes to Owner, who shut down any possible attempts at proactivity from Blabber and had such a strong impact on all win conditions. Our fifth game of the day is Royal Never Give Up, the fourth seed of the LPL, versus CTBC Flying Oysters, the first seed of the PCS. This game is such a good one to see out of the Royals. The Flying Oysters, for their part, traded blow for blow as best as they can, answering across the map to equalize pressure, and even in some instances were the more proactive team. The issue came down to execution for the most part. Flying Oysters were a little too impatient, finding any small opportunity to fight, while the Royals took the time to set things up really early in. Once the mid-game came around, chaos would ensue, and the Royals took full advantage to play out the side lanes to their strengths. I have slight concerns usually when it comes to the late game of the Royals, but they showed that they had the right steps to close out the game with a 10k advantage without having any mistakes from the Flying Oysters, which is such a good thing to see from the Royals. Because this game didn't feel like the Flying Oysters was the weaker team being punished for lackluster mistakes. It felt like the Royals outplaying a team that had a game plan of their own. My MVP for this game is Ming, who created so many incredible engages to get the winning team fights where it mattered. The sixth and last game of the day is DRX, the fourth seed out of the LCK, versus Top Esports, the second seed out of the LPL. The doubtful have been proven wrong about how strong DRX are this year at Worlds. Honestly, I'm utterly surprised to see this kind of play out of Pioshik, out of all people, in this game. To solidly nullify Tian in the jungle, making sure to really set things behind for them, all while the bot side of the map is just being misplayed by Top Esports. The top side getting harder and harder for Wayward to come back, and Knight is the only player from Top who has upkept gold generation in a way that is relevant to the state of the game at any particular stage. The lack of proactivity from DRX is gone, the coordination was present, vision was immaculate from minute one, and the tempo of the game consistent. Top Esports did attempt to find some angles back into the game, but the sense of hesitation was so clear out of them, and they did not expect DRX to come at this level, and no amount of skill checking was going to work when this far behind. And I really can't believe I'm saying this, but my MVP for this game goes to Pioshik, who played way better than I've seen him in months at this point. As the games came around, I came looking at the score and trying to look at the different games that had played out, and this is only day 3, right? Day 4, we get the halfway point, but one of the groups has already done their halfway point. Group A alone already has their 3 scores, and it's a 3-way tie for first place, and then Cloud9 last. And there was a point where I thought, okay, cool. This is great to see that there's a lot more competition. It's a lot closer than it seems across the board. Except for North America, who, and this is the conversation that happens year after year after year, where people seem enthused by the idea that they're going to probably do good. And I didn't expect them to, but I also expected them to be a little bit more competitive. And there are glimpses here and there, and it's a little early to really call things because they've surprised and had greater comebacks on the second half of their plays usually. But this doesn't look like one of those years with every other team being so competitive and at a higher level just overall. There is not a sense that I can see that any of the North American teams even have a shot. Which is something different from any of the other years where you can tell they have a shot, but this is even more solidly the case as they're last across the board. But it's also really interesting to see that none of the teams match their placing. None of the first seeds are solidly in first. None of the fourth seeds are even remotely close to last. And it's all up into the air. It's looking more like who has the better read at the meta, which is oftentimes something that's discussed, but usually not followed through because the top seeds tend to still dominate within their groups, with notable exceptions here or there. So, looking at Group A and seeing that all 3 of these teams, 2 of which are third seeds and one of them is a second seed, tied. And regardless of the fact that Cloud9 being the first seed there, usually they're fairly competitive. And seeing the likes of JD Gaming being the only first seed to really be competitive and like consistently so is super interesting. And I'm really excited to see where this leads off. Otherwise, it's still totally up into the air what the final matchup will be for groups, and I'll love to see how things roll around for the last games of the first round robin for the groups B, C, and D. Otherwise, regarding meta, it seems like things have fairly solidified for the most part. There has been, honestly, a whole lot in terms of the... Like, we've hit 93 champions, not the record yet. Close, but not yet. And it's fairly solidified in terms of who is going to have what priority and which champions are likely to be played. But there's always a meta shift when it comes to best of fives, or even on the second round robin. And this is honestly even fewer shifts than I expected. Going from play-ins to groups, usually there's an expectation that there's going to be at least a little bit of a change, and yet we're here seeing that the play-ins has such a huge influence on the situation that does it really seem to matter overall that there's a play-ins in a group? Should that event completely be nullified and the group stage and play-in stage fused together? I think that's a conversation again about the format of Worlds and how outdated it really seems, as the play-in teams have such a stronger understanding of how to approach things that they really come out of the gate swinging. And whether they keep that momentum to qualify into the best of five section is a different thing as teams really get the hang of it. I feel like the play-in stage is such a necessary foundation for all of the teams that it feels weird to have them separate still. But those are at least my first thoughts when it comes to the end of day 3. And as day 4 comes around, my thoughts are going to likely change on the situation, or as many people's expectations are going to change, or not at all. Round 1s are weird. The round 2s are usually when things get a little bit clearer, but for the moment, round 1 seems like play-in teams have just the stronger read and the stronger approach overall. So those are my thoughts. I want to hear what you guys have to think in the comments down below. Do you think also the play-in buff is way too strong and maybe play-ins and groups should be fused? Do you think no, it's probably just over-exaggerated hype based off of like teams that are probably seated in the wrong place? Any and every thought, I would love to hear from what you guys have to say. If you like this kind of content, I've got other video playlists over here regarding the other days that I've reviewed, as well as all of the teams so far that have qualified. And leave a like and subscribe. I appreciate everybody who watches. It means a heck of a lot to me. And with that, I will see you next time for day 4 and the end of the round 1 best of 1. Have a good one.